Hello and welcome to HBM's Crypto Corner for Wednesday, January 5th, 2022. We are in the new year. We have a couple of things to talk about, so let's get started. NESI review of 2021. This is kind of a long one, so settle in, folks. This is going to take a while. It is time to look back on the year past, and so let us get straight into the recorded sightings via Gary Campbell's Sightings Register. This records 6 sightings for the year, which compares to 8 in 2020 and 13 in 2019. Now, not every account will turn out to be the monster. Let everyone judge and be persuaded in their own mind. In fact, to this day, there is no such thing as a confirmed sighting, as there is no agreed benchmark by which to measure such accounts, and who would be the judge that chooses the ruler to perform the measurement? In my mind, there are sightings that are beyond my reasonable doubt, but that will not be the case for others. I would categorize 4 as single humps. One is a water disturbance, and the last was detected underwater on sonar. 3 had photographs, and 1 included a sketch. The quality of the photographs are not good, and again exemplify the problem of photography at the lock with mobile phone cameras, assuming these were the devices in use. The image below, taken by Thomas Davidson on July 30th, drives home the point. The witness states that the dark-colored object below the castle was about 200 yards away and the size of a dog. One may churlishly ask what kind of dog, a Great Dane or a Chihuahua? If we assume a typical mutt, then we are talking about 2 to 3 feet across. If we triple this to represent the 6 to 9 feet of hump that would break the surface for an 18 to 27 foot monster, even that would not look great on such a photograph, and this is a distance one may expect some clarity. But no, assuming these estimates are correct, even a close-up of the large creature may not cut the mustard due to the poor lens and aperture involved. Remember, mobile phones are for close-up friends and family or huge buildings, mountains, and so on. I do not think I have seen a decent, defensible picture of the monster since 2016 of the Cape Powell fin-like object. Before that, we may go back to Bill Jobs and Jonathan Bright around 10 years ago. Have mobile phones made the situation worse as people ditch decent cameras for them? I don't know, but it is a subject for discussion. One report that I rank higher was by Colin Veacock on July 30th. I have read the reports in the media, but I know Colin from his previous postings as a Nessie fan on Steve Feltham's Facebook group. Colin said the newspaper reports got various things wrong, so I visited his own account, given in fragments, and reproduced it here. I was scanning up and down the lock north of the castle when on my third pass I noticed this object about 2/3 of the way across the lock. It was suddenly just there. I didn't, as one site put it, see a prehistoric monster surge out of the water. At first I thought it was small, but later when the Jacobite warrior passed, I got a better idea of scale. It was 2 feet high, 10 to 12 foot long, and tapered away into the water. I came to that estimate by judging it was the same size as the handrail at the rear of the warrior. A black dinghy speedboat passed close, but it never moved. An Indian couple parked on my right, followed my directions, and gave me a thumbs up indicating he could see it. Then the clouds broke, bathing the opposite shore and hills in bright sunlight, and I lost sight of it in the reflections in the water. I didn't, as one site said, see it plunge into the peaty depths. I just lost sight of it. I think it was an animal, but not prehistoric. Got to admit, though, while watching it, I was hoping the classic neck and head would pop up. I've always thought that Nessie is something completely new, something we haven't come across before due to it spending most of its time in the deep water. I also think it's the same species of animal spotted in other bodies of water at that latitude. It was just too far away. It was the same size as the handrail at the rear of the Jacobite warrior. Besides which, every time I looked away, it took me a while to relocate it. I should say as well, I thought it was much smaller until the boat came along and gave me a better understanding of the scale and distance involved. Colin provided a sketch shown here. When I saw this, I thought to myself, where have I seen this before? The high end of the tapering hump evoked a memory of another sighting, separated by decades but connected by similarity. The answer came from Rupert T. Gold, a mere 88 years before, and the witness was a Mr. W. D. H. Moir near Ikna Kardak Bay on the 26th of August, 1933, about 9:15 p.m. The text from Gould is below. Mr. Moir was walking from Fort Augustus along the road running towards Port Clare, which skirts Ikna Kardak Bay. Just after he had passed Cherry Island, he noticed a powerful wash in the loch and observed an object heading to pass close to the far side of the island. He took it at first to be a boat hurrying from the canal lock, whose gates at that time were closed at 9 p.m. As to the visibility, he remarks, at the time the sun was setting behind the hills, casting bright reflecting lights over the loch, high over the loch and the treetops, while the water was dead calm. The object passed dangerously close to the far side of Cherry Island and headed into Inchnakardak Bay. By this time Mr. Moir, who, having heard no sound of oars or engine, had concluded it was not a boat, had turned round and was walking back towards the bay. When within the bay, it slowed down and appeared to roll from side to side, causing a rolling wash, which spread until it reached the shore. Suspecting that he was looking at X, he left the road and went down towards the shore for a closer view, managing to get within, as he estimates, 200 yards of it. 2 points chiefly surprised him: X's color and its size. He had gathered from previous accounts that X was black or almost so, whereas it appeared to him to be brown, with a tendency to changing colors of a lighter nature nearer the surface of the water. And he estimated the length of the portion visible to him at 40 feet. Somewhat resembling an upturned boat, it rose moderately sharply to a height of some 5 feet above water, at about the same distance from the rear end, and then sloped gently down towards the front. As he saw neither head nor tail, he concluded that the total length could scarcely be less than 50 feet. He had X in view for 4 to 5 minutes. He started to walk back towards Fort Augustus, hoping to get a lift on the way, collect his camera, and return to photograph X. After he had gone some distance, he noticed that the time was 9:30 and decided that the chance of getting a photograph was remote. He therefore returned, but discovered, on coming inside the bay, that X had disappeared. And I'm guessing this is the sketch. The differences between 1933 and 2021 was that Moir's creature was more than 3 times longer. The other was that the Moir creature was moving, whereas Collins did not seem to budge an inch. Note that the monster continues to surprise. If one had been asked to guess in what direction the creature would move, you may have said right to left, as you assumed the raised portion was the shoulders and the back receded down to the submerged tail. But no, it heads off tapered head first. Would Collins' object have moved in a similar fashion? The length to height ratio of the Moir monster was 8 to 1. Collins estimated his as between 10 to 1 and 6.71, which averages to 83.1, very close to the Moir account. As stated above, Collins was less in accord with the journalist who typed up his account. Since this sighting, the reporters have driven me to the point of madness. Only one swapped an email with me. The rest just exaggerated and right out lied about what I saw. Seems if you're a reporter and you're going to write up a piece on Loch Ness, you either exaggerate and blow it all out of proportion, or you ridicule it and belittle the sighting. What they don't do is just honestly report the facts. One argument of the skeptics is that journalists take mundane accounts and spice them up to monstrous levels. In other words, the original account would have been easily explicable if known. It is an attempt to tar and brush many eyewitness story in one sweeping generalization. As we can see here, they do exaggerate, but the original account is good enough to avoid simplistic dismissal. Indeed, Gould himself re-interviewed many a witness who were previously published and found them still to be notable accounts. One final observation is that the Veacock and Dobinson accounts happened on the same day, separated by 3.5 hours and perhaps less than a mile apart. Perhaps Colin can verify that. Maybe that is just coincidence, or perhaps it lends mutual credibility. Sonar image was discussed in this blog only a few weeks ago at this link. It is a good account by Benjamin Scanlon, allied with the boat captain Mike Bell. I discussed the matter with Mike and felt it was an object of some considerable dimensions, though what exactly those were and what the actual morphology of the object was were beyond the capability of the sonar device. I assume that we will be getting a few more of these images in the year ahead of us. The third class of account now merits its own section on Gary Sightings' website, and that is the genre of webcam video images. Gary numbers them at 10 for the year compared to 5 local sightings and 1 sonar scan. 5 were by regular webcam watcher Eoin Fagan, 2 by Kaylin Wangle, and 1 by Wei-Ming Jiang, Matt Reddick, and Rosalind Casey. Now, the regular charge is that these images are just specs of not real use. I wouldn't disagree much with that, but when I checked the 3 photos that we have of the local surface sightings, they were no better, perhaps worse. That's not the fault of any person. They can only work with the tools they have. But perhaps some hope is in hand as Steve Feltham is looking into installing a webcam from his home on Doris Bay, or perhaps somewhere close by. Obviously, as close to the lock as possible is high on the list, but I would also suggest a bit of elevation as well and a good HD resolution. Other higher cost questions may be infrared night vision, slow panning to cover more lock, and zoom. I have no idea how feasible all that is. So much for the sightings log. What about research on this blog? The main breakthrough was finding the Sidney Wignall aerial film of something in Loch Morar. It took a bit of digging and luck, but I got some images out there and the object itself below. However, I concluded I was as ambiguous as Sidney was as to the subject's identity. For now, I will say tree log and hope to investigate on site in the year ahead. The other area of investigation this year was the location of the famous 1934 surgeon's photograph. I take the view it is a fake, but where from? In my article, I hesitated an educated guess that clues in the story and picture suggests it may have been taken at a quiet spot in Foyers Bay. That opened a slight possibility that something of the model may still be recoverable under ideal circumstances. To that end, I headed there in July with my metal detector. You can see me in action below, trawling the shallows. The trouble was, I picked up so much metal thrown in over the decades, any trace of the Christian Sperling submarine may be lost in the noise, if there at all. It was a speculative punt and a bit of fun to boot. At the lock in general, I published 2 trip reports, which are here and here. I also did a couple of interviews for crypto-oriented podcasts, and you can see what else I wrote by clicking through the 2021 article History to the bottom right of the blog. The other event of note was an unwanted one in the death of water cryptid researcher Scott Martis, who died too young this year, and all I can say again is rest in peace, mate. You will be missed. In summary, I wrote 34 articles this year, which is actually an all-time low of 1 every 11 days. The best was 104 posts in 2012, or twice every week. You may well ask if I am getting bored with the subject or am finding less to write about. Well, I'm actually concentrating more on other subjects non-Nessie related, which has had an effect. But there is a bit of truth in the less to write about category. As I enter the 13th year of this blog, and 787 articles on, the majority of the major photos, films, sightings, and hoaxes have been covered. But some have been revisited this year, as mentioned above for the surgeon's photograph and also the AAA sighting by John McLean from 1938, as new information bolstered that account. In fact, I hope to start 2022 with an article on one of the classic sightings yet to be covered here. New sightings will obviously continue to come in, and personal research will continue as it looks into things old and new. With that, I wish all readers prosperous 2022. So, a very interesting summary of 2021. of some of the major happenings in Nessie research. The main focus this week is on the Loch Ness Monster, actually. Good old-fashioned research. Time to talk about Loch Ness Monster research the good old-fashioned way. I don't mean dragging huge ham joints by hook in a boat or sweeping wartime searchlights across the loch, but rather the mundane trawling of the archives for information. One of my favorite venues for this has been the National Library of Scotland in Edinburgh. It is one of Britain's largest libraries, housing over 24 million items such as books, newspapers, photographs, films, and manuscripts going back centuries, with the emphasis on Scottish culture, a perfect place for Loch Ness Monster research. When I started researching my first book, The Water Horses of Loch Ness, 10 years ago, it was not all about online or digitized resources. Since the book was concerned with Scottish monster folklore, I was busy reserving and consulting books from the 18th and 19th century, right up to but before the Nessie era of 1933. Sometimes white cotton gloves were required to handle the rarer and more delicate books. A lot of fact-checking went on, such as verifying a claim made to the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau decades ago that Daniel Defoe mentioned two leviathans seen in Loch Ness by General Wade's road builders in a certain edition of his book, A Tour Through the Whole Island of Great Britain, undertaken in 1724. It was fun handling those ancient books with their weird fonts and ye olde English. Part of that research was scanning through old Scottish and Highland newspapers. Now, newspapers over 100 years old are generally not available due to their fragile nature. After all, they were originally intended to be read and discarded after a few days. To preserve the originals, they were photographed page by page and transferred to rolls of microfilm. Many were the days I plugged a roll of film into the microfilm reader and flicked through the image of the pages projected onto the screen, not just for that book research, but for retrieving information on old sightings, expeditions, and personalities. Now, you might think online websites such as the British Newspaper Archive has made those microfilm readers obsolete, but this is not the case. For example, its online archive does not hold any Inverness Courier copies after 1909, 24 years before Nessie reports began to flood in. Likewise, nothing from the Northern Chronicle after 1914. Such local newspapers carry monster reports not seen anywhere else. Having said that, titles and years are being added all the time, and it has to be admitted that finding key words such as the Loch Ness Monster is much harder with microfilm than typing a search term into a website. But a day is coming when the local researcher will have little advantage over the global researcher, as Google continues to digitize millions of books and all old newspapers go online. Until that day comes, I will continue to visit the vast collection that is the National Library of Scotland, and so it was that I was there last Thursday. I had reserved some items, not all Loch Ness related, and took my seat here. One book was reserved because it cost about £170 to buy, and I wasn't going to shell out that much. The other was a book from 1642 that I wished to peruse as well. Then it was on to the microfilm rolls, one for a bit of family research and the other Loch Ness related. That was the Inverness Courier for the last half of 1973 as I was researching a new article. Even though I had one item in mind, I liked to scan on and see what else was going on at that time. I found a couple of references to the upcoming Japanese expedition of that time, which were of slight interest as they did not cover the actual event. In fact, I found only one sighting recorded for that time period, which is shown at the top. In terms of microfilm to blog, this involves printing the article, scanning it onto my laptop when I get home, and then running this image through an OCR application, and finally correcting any mistakes in that process to give you the text below. I must also add that since my last visit, the library had replaced the old microfilm readers with new digitized ones. You set up the film roll in the spindles as usual, but the current page is now scanned digitally and then displayed on the computer monitor. Did this make microfilm research easier? No, it made it worse. If you know exactly what you are looking for, then it is probably great, but if you do not, it is a royal pain. I say this, I say that because when I search chronologically through the newspaper pages, I can quickly scroll past unwanted pages, such as the adverts or sports pages. In a straightforward, bold projection, the pages scroll past you on the screen. With the newfangled version, you have to click the forward button with your mouse, and the longer you press the button, the more it advances. However, you do not see the film scroll past you. The monitor goes black until you let go of the mouse button, which means you have no idea how far you have advanced until the program spends 4 to 5 seconds scanning in the film below and then displaying it. I eventually gave up on the mouse and just rotated the spindle with my fingers, using the actual microfilm transparencies as a guide. This made scroll through take 2 to 3 times longer. I hope they put back at least one old analog device for good old-fashioned researchers like myself. But back to the monster report. Monster seen off foyers. Hotel guests thrill. Sightings of the Loch Ness Monster this summer have been few and far between. But news has just come that it was watched by a number of guests at Foyers Hotel 2 weeks ago. It was after 9 o'clock in the evening that the sighting occurred, when several guests were walking in the hotel grounds, which, like the hotel itself, occupy a commanding stance overlooking the loch. There were 2 humps, each separated by a space of water several feet apart, and the guests thought the total length of the 2 humps was 20 feet and of a dark color. The humps appeared fairly close inshore and not far from the spot where work is going on at the North of Scotland Hydroelectric Board's pump storage rig is situated at the loch side. The humps then moved away towards the opposite side of the loch in a diagonal line, and the crossing to the far side took the best part of 7 minutes. The guests were astounded and later spoke of their experience to the hotel manager. Unfortunately, a party of senior pupils from a well-known school at Leamington Spa, who were in the hotel at the time for coffee, were unaware of what was happening on the loch's surface. For it is the 3rd year in succession that a party from the school has spent part of the vacation at Loch Ness side in hope of seeing the monster. Some more good old-fashioned research followed as I looked at the sightings database I consult, which showed 3 sightings from 1973. The more extensive list compiled by Ulrich Magen, which is less fastidious and precise, gives 12 sightings. This reduces to 10 if we discount the 2 reported sightings by Frank Searle. By cross-referencing with Nicholas Witchell's The Loch Ness Story, 1975 edition, page 71, our unnamed witnesses turn out to be a party of 5, including a Mr. J. Shaw and Mr. E. Moran from Yorkshire. As the article states, I can concur that the location offers a commanding view of the loch, as this picture I took below in 2017 shows. I suspect many a monster hunter has scanned the loch for hints of the monster from here. However, the counter to commanding views is the longer distances, and so any normal photo taken from this location will likely produce an interesting image but no game changer. It is a 2-humper, and its diagonal progress across the loch clearly excludes such phenomena as wakes and waves. Also, boats do not tend to follow each other less than 20 feet apart. Since the object was seen close inshore and the loch is about a mile wide, if we assume a 45-degree diagonal swim to the opposite side in 7 minutes, this gives us a rough speed of 12 miles per hour, which is faster than the usual outboard motorboats. Interestingly, there was another sighting about 8 hours before by the Pugh family up the top of the loch opposite Tor Point on the A82 detailed in Rip Hembel's Nest Letter number 2. They observed what they thought was a smooth, blackish-brown sandbank 100 yards out and 4 to 6 feet long, which later disappeared. Later they realized Loch Ness has no tides, and it was likely that they had been watching a low-lying hump. Could these have been the same creature? Of course, one may say no, because one is 2 humps and the other is a single hump. But as we know, our cryptid is a bit of a shapeshifter when it comes to back contours. Ultimately, we shall never know at this point. One final word is for those senior pupils from Leamington Spa High School who missed out on the sighting. As it turns out, we have met this group before in a previous article. They had been to the loch previously in 1971 and 1972 and produced a booklet on those trips below. I did not know that they had returned in 1973, and as to what they may or may not have seen, I have no idea. So, very interesting stuff about the Loch Ness Monster in this week's episode. And of course, I will link both articles below. And that's going to do it for this week. I want to thank you very much for tuning in. You guys are the heart of the show. I always say that, but I always mean it. And I will continue to do this as long as you guys want me to. This is starting my 7th year with HBM's Crypto Corner. So until next week, y'all be good or be good. This is HBM's Crypto Corner.